Hi, this is Ferry, and so today I am going to be talking about the missing element in Western spirituality and also introduction to Chinese metaphysics and astrology. So I have did a presentation on an astrology conference lately, and I feel this is a really important topic, and also there's something I'm passionate about at the moment. So I want to having a quick introduction for people who are interested in Chinese metaphysics and astrology and how different culture influence and different divination system as well. Yeah, so this is the topic I'm going to talk about today. And yeah, and then so about me. So my name is Ferry, and I am astrologer and shamanic healer born and raised in China, and now based in Wellington, New Zealand. And so at the moment, I am building an ecosystem for people's healing. So my vision is trying to help people understand, explore the mind, body, and spirit as one interconnected system. So you can go back no matter where your healing stage are, you can go back to the places and to find practical tool to applying the ancient wisdom and with your modern life. Yeah, so this is what I'm doing and at the moment. And so if you're interested, you can go to my website called cosmicfairyq.com and you can check more information over there. And then let's get into the topic. Yeah, so we're having a three-part, and the first part is the missing element, what is Wu Xing, and then the earth element in Chinese metaphysics, and then how Wu Xing application in Bazi astrology. So if you're not familiar with these terms, which is fine, and I will explain more later in the presentation. So yeah, the missing element. Where is the missing element in Western astrology or Western spirituality? So let's find out. So in Western astrology, we have four elements, and which is fire, inspiration, earth, stability, and then air, intellect, and water and emotions, right? So if you are familiar with Western astrology, this is the fundamental thing you have to learn is the skeleton in a way, and this adding on a lot of descriptor to your chart and analysis, analysis, right? Yeah, and so when you say fire sign, we imagine Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius, and then we have Earth sign, Taurus, Virgo, and Capricorn, air sign, Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius, and water sign, Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces, right? So all of this are, very interesting description about an archetype and also personalities, right? So that's basically what Western astrology is for. It's basically built on a system that can help you describe who you are. And also, of course, they are along with like what's your pattern and how you go with life, right? So the core of the system is describing the archetypes and personalities, and then the four element answer the question of who I am. Right. So when you think about that, you can actually see there's a Western cultural reflection about individuality. It's about who I am, it's about me, and it's about self-expression, it's about self-identity. And then when we're looking at Chinese astrology, there's totally different point of view. Of course, there's no right or wrong. They just approach things with different lens, right? So there are five elements or five phases in Chinese astrology, and that's a foundation of all Chinese metaphysics. And so because the five phases or five elements, and when you translate into English, and yeah, so if you call the five element, it's actually Wu Xing. Wu means five, Xing means movement. And but when you translate like in the Western, we normally call it five element, but actually the more accurate translation is supposed to be five phases or five movement because it has totally different function than Western astrology. But I think for the better association, so therefore some people translate into five elements, so people can, oh, actually there's some link, but they're totally different function. So I'll explain that later more. And so the first element is Wood, which is this one, which is called Mu, and that's growth and represents spring. And it often is describing the beginning of a new cycle where vision, expansion, and new possibility emerge. And then we have fire, which is the passion and summer, in the face of full expression, vitality, and flourishing. Yeah, and this core, and then earth. That's like the missing element. So if you can associate with wood, I think normally we can associate with wood with air element in Western astrology, and fire is the fire. But earth is a little bit different than the earth in the Western astrology. So this is like actually totally different element, if you say, or the missing element. So the earth is stability, transition. So the center that grounds, integrates, and harmonizes each stage of transformation. And which is another interesting thing here. So when you're looking at this Chinese character, and this, if you translate it directly to English, so it's not supposed to be Earth. Earth, for in Chinese, we think about Earth planet, but this Earth is a soil, right? So when you're thinking about that, it's actually not the same thing. And then the metal structure, and which is Jing, which is this one, is like representing autumn, the harvest phase, and we refine, simplify, and preserve what truly matters. And this is actually more associated with the Western, the Earth sign, yeah, the structure and the grounding, the condensation like trait. Yeah, and then the water is flow, and which is describing winter, and it's a season of rest and reflection and restoration before life begins again. So the whole system is actually not to describing a personality or archetype. So that's where we can introducing you and the foundational operating system in Chinese Bazi astrology and also a lot of Chinese metaphysics is all based on this. There's no exception for that. And so what is Wu Xing and five? And like I said before, Wu is the five and Xing is movement. So the accurate translation is supposed to be five faces or five movement. I mentioned that before. So when you're looking at this, if yin and yang is the binary code of the universe, the five element Wu Xing an operating system. So Wu Xing is better translated to as five faces or five movement, and they're not five static element like Greek thought, but five dynamic process, five quality of energy in a constant state of interaction. So it describes energy cycle and process of change and relationship. So it's describing a dynamic process and change and movement and interaction and rather than a single element of like trait and like what looks like. Yes, and you can describing using this five element or five faces describing a profile personality profile, but that's not what it's for. It's actually by through understanding the relationship with all the things within this process, within the cycle, then therefore to understand how you go about it. And it's all about balancing the relationship and balancing a chart rather than like just describing what it is. And it's like how I relate to a bigger whole, right? And also like you can see, because I think the most fundamental thing in the Chinese metaphysics and also Bazi astrology, the most important thing is understanding the relationship between these five elements. And so you can see this cycle is basically called generation cycle. So basically when the wood is actually fuels fire, right? So because wood can give the fire the fuel, and then therefore the fire can be bigger. And then fire, when transforming things and making ashes, then become earth. And then earth is bears metal is basically like moon produce not moon, sorry, earth produce the metal, and then the metal produce water, and that's the whole generation cycle, and that's one thing. But also there's another cycle which is a control cycle, which you can see is in the pentagram in here. So for example, the water controls fire because water distinguish fire, right? And then the wood controls earth. The wood break the earth basically because the root is go down to the earth and breaking the earth, and so it's cannot like gathering together in a way. And then earth control dams water. So this is also controlling relationship here. And fire melt the melt metal. So this is controlling relationship between these two. And then the metal cuts wood. And then that's also another controlling relationship here. And one thing I really appreciate here, when you can looking at the difference between cultures, like in Chinese Bazi astrology or in Wu Xing system, there's no element is good or bad, and you only consider whether it's too much or it's too little. So you always find a way to balancing it. So if it's too much, that's sickness. If it's too little, that's sickness too. So it's always finding the relationship, find a way through those elemental relationship, and then to bring the chart back to balance, to bring your life to balance. So that's why, and also they very appreciate this controlling cycle as well. So I think in Western culture, normally we emphasize the freedom so much, and we so much dislike any kind of restraint or like regulation. But in ancient Chinese sages' eyes, and they say like the control and regulation is necessary for the balance. Otherwise, things will go too much excessive and being burnout or like too chaotic. So I think the goal is achieve equilibrium in life and the balance in life. And yeah, so I think that's kind of like really interesting thing to see here. And then, yeah, that's another thing I want to mention here. That's why how it's reflecting on a culture sort of, like perspective, and like in terms of how it influenced those like divination system or Chinese metaphysics, right? So it's basically the whole Wu Xing system is answer a question of how do I live in harmony with greater whole. And it's not about me, it's about balance, it's about harmony, it's about relationships, and between the individual and the great good. And so there's a really famous concept called 家国 Tian Xia. It is a Confucian philosophy which reflects collective culture in China, linking personal duty to global harmony. So 家, which is family, the foundational unit of more morality, yeah, and personal cultivation. And then 国 is the extension of familial loyalty and ethical governance to a political community. And then 天下 is the all under heaven, and which is the world and ultimate horizon of responsibility, denoting universal peace and a moral order for all humanity, right? So when you translate in a simple way, is like without the world and there's no nation. Without nation, there's no family. Without the family, there's no self. And so what I'm saying here is like there's a quick little story. Like I have lived in China for 28 years, and then now I live in New Zealand for 7 years. I immersed myself in both culture, and I can see very distinguishedly what's the difference between the culture. For example, I remember when we going through COVID and pandemic, and in New Zealand, there's a policy coming out to, especially in the peak time, like we need to like mandatorily and wearing mask. And at that time, I was studying in a university, and then like most of people surrounding me are from Asia or Southeast Asia and all that, and we kind of like sharing a little bit collective culture in a way. And then I realized how much resistance that coming from people from or live from the Western culture, like more individualistic culture. And there's much more resistance coming from them. And for me, I will feel like, yes, I need to wear a mask because I don't want to, it's for others basically. It's for others. It's uncomfortable for me, but I'm doing this for the greater good and for the community. Therefore, I'm happy to sacrifice. I think that's really embodied in the Chinese culture as well. So we always emphasize on the from like I said, without the world, there's no nation. Without the nation, there's no family. Without family, there's the self. Self is the last one you consider, and which can go to another extreme, which over giving, over sacrificing your own desire and need, and therefore lost to self. And also, but good thing is also like you can see how why the collective harmonious order is much more important than your so-called freedom of self-expression. So I'm not saying it's good or bad, but I feel like both sides need to learn from each other in order to find that balance, right? So yeah, so I think that's kind of like a culture perspective towards it as well. And then what is Wu Xing? And you can see this chart. And so this basically have different layer of meaning basically, and that's connecting with totally different system and also like interpretation as well. So the wood, which is if you and also like I said, one thing I want to mention here as well. So all the Wu Xing system is coming from yin and yang principle. So and all the Chinese metaphysics is also coming from yin and yang. Without yin, there's no yang. Without yang, there's no yin. They're interactive and also opposing each other, but also dependent on each other. So like all the universal creation is coming from yin and yang. That's what ancient Chinese sage believes, and also they're creating the whole system and through that. Right. So the yin and yang, you can see the wood is less yang and the fire is greater yang and the earth is balanced. I will talking about the earth's element more later on. So what that means, why it's different in the Western spirituality and astrology, right? So metal is the less yin and water is greater yin. And as you can see, there's also some correspondence with the wet season as well. So the wood is like things starting to coming up, so that's why it's spring. And then fire is the summer, right? So which is everything is vibrant and is joy and is in the peak. And then there's a transitioning period of season in between the fire and season and autumn. It's basically allowing the seasons like greater yang energy to balancing to drop to settle, and then we're starting to having the yin energy coming up. So it's autumn and winter. And then we have direction like corresponding this as well. So I have east, south, and center, and west and north. Yeah, so I definitely will talking about the Earth later on more. And then also the climate, like wind, heat, dampness, dryness, cold, and this all associated with this. And color correspondence as well. And also this is very interesting thing here. So that's how it used in traditional Chinese medicine as well. So because so the traditional Chinese medicine is also looking for the balance in the body. And you can see, for example, if you have a lot of fire or a lot of wood and in your sort of like in your body, and then we will go, for example, treat the liver and trying to reduce the excessive wood element in this organ, right? So there's a way of balancing the qi by assessing the elemental energy in your body, and therefore to balancing it out. It's not trying to like managing the symptom rather than to allowing your life force, your qi, internal qi, move smoothly and healthy in a way. Yeah, so I think that's kind of like the application in the traditional Chinese medicine. And yeah, so there's a virtual correspondence and also there's sound. And yeah, so this is just like quick introduction about like what it can be and what is the association with the different things. Therefore, can adding on different interpretations to the chart and to other things. And then there's a really interesting thing I want to mention here is do you see the planet, right? So actually in the Bazi astrology chart, we never use a single planet. But there's some interesting like connection between the Western astrology and Bazi astrology here. So when you see Ood and it's associated with Jupiter, right? And in Chinese, and the translation of Jupiter is actually called Mu Xing, which is Ood star. So Chinese people doesn't really do fancy names and just like because they pair them up with this five planet and two the element, therefore they called it Ood star, right? So and then the fire is the fire star, 火星, and then Saturn is 土星, which is the earth star, right? And Venus is metal, and then is the metal star, 金星. and then water is Mercury, which is Shui Xing. And I was really interested when I looking at it, because I think when you're looking at, if you know a little bit about Western astrology, you will see the wood and Jupiter is actually having a little bit correspondence here because wood is representing spring, growth, and go up, and Jupiter is also expansion growth as well. So there's like a link between in here. And fire, and you can see Mars is definitely very fiery planet, and it's about like passion, it's about like, um and action and all that and movement, and this is also kind of like a trait for the fire sign, fire element in Chinese astrology. So this is a correspondence here, and Earth, and which is associated with Saturn. And Saturn is also quite like with the Earth element is transition, like grounding and more mature, and that can also link to the Saturn planet as well. But when I'm looking at metal and Venus, I was like, I cannot link it because Venus in Western astrology is more, um, you know, um, uh, yeah, love and beauty, and that cannot associate with the trait of metal in Chinese astrology because metal is like structure, is like very thinking and intellectual, that kind of trait. There's nothing to do with Venus. And therefore, I was like, this is interesting. And then same thing with the Mercury as well. Like Mercury, I would never associate Mercury with water because Mercury is very intellectual, is the thinking mind, and in Western astrology, but water is very emotional. So therefore, it's like this doesn't make any sense, right? And then I realized I did some of the research and then saying like they pair them up in the ancient our ancestors, they paired them up based on visual appearance and astronomical observation. So there's it's not about the meaning of it because in the ancient our ancestors that doesn't understand what's going on in the West. They don't know. They have a system describing all of this. They just using the five Wu Xing system to trying to come up with a calendar, time calendar basically, and to describing the energetic signature of that time, and then therefore tracking the astronomical like observation of things, and then like also recording the historical event, therefore coming up with a system that can actually helping us navigating time basically. Yeah, so the side story, and then I noticed that is like the ancient people made mirror out of polished copper, and then the symbol of Venus is a representative of copper hand mirror. So that's an interesting thing I find out here. Yeah, and then application of Wu Xing. And so this is something I wanna mention here. So the five elements are nothing but description of how energy moves according to law and yin and yang. And all of this metaphysics is built upon principle of yin and yang, and Wu Xing is a tool to describe the relationship and the dynamics of interaction with all things. Wood represent yang energy, and fire represent old yang energy, and metal represent yang yin energy, and water represent old yin energy. Earth is a byproduct of interaction among the other element and can also hold both yin and yang, right? So yeah, if you're looking at here, right? So we have different system in Chinese metaphysics, and Bazi is called the four pillar of destiny. And some people, if you're born in China and or in a lot of Asian country, and most people will take it as a fortune telling. It's something like the bad reputation with tarot as well. So, but actually, this is not for fortune telling, and it's for understanding how you live with time, with all the repetitive pattern and how it affecting your chart and how you're balancing it out, right? So it reads the time basically. And then we have feng shui, and also that's kind of like reading energetic space and through the yin and yang and bagua and wu xing. That's how you apply in here. And then the traditional Chinese medicine, like I mentioned before, is applying Wu Xing in the body and associate with different organ, like with the element. And then you can checking by adding on or reducing some element through food, through like medicines, and to assist your body to balancing your qi, basically. And then I Ching is like more understanding change and also transformation. So if you have specific situation you want to ask and or asking guidance, and that's where it kind of like there's a concept called 取向, which is draw essence and from the symbolism of the sky of the cosmos, and then that can give you much more insight to what is actually going on. And then we have 奇门遁甲, which is like strategic moment, and you checking in one moment, see what's happening in that moment, and then you understand why is that moment is good for me to do something or is not. It's similar, a little bit similar with the horary astrology in Western as well. Is in the moment of the question is asked and checking in, is that a good time for these things to happen or is that not? Right? And then we have 紫微斗数 as well. This is basically to looking at your life structures and cycles. That's also based on the Wu Xing application. So we have so many systems to help you understand how we're interacting with energetic, with ourselves and with nature, with community, with the greater whole. And it's a really comprehensive system to understand everything is energy, basically. And then there's another thing I want to mention here is when you're looking at all those systems, right? And so, Western have a really interesting teaching about manifestation, saying it's kind of as long as you have a good mindset, you're feeling into it, and then you are manifesting it. But for me, there's always something not right with that. And then when you're looking at how the Chinese to looking at things, there's a saying called 天时地利人和. That's how you manifest things, right? So 天时, if you translate it, is sky timing, and we call it heaven, right? You're looking at heaven first. You're looking at timing first. That's your priority. Without timing, there's nothing will manifest, right? And then 地利, like this called like your environment and earth as well. Looking at earth, looking which environment you're in. You can't not, for example, asking, like people maybe living in a war zone, like really suffering, like meditate or manifest their way out of it. This is just not in the right environment. So right environment is really important too. And then 人和 is basically the harmony within us, within the human. 人 is human, right? So we're looking at the cosmos first, and then we see how applying our environment, and do we need to change our environment, and then we do healing and cultivate inner peace within ourselves. So according to the ancient Chinese sages, a fulfilling and balanced life is built upon three foundations: understanding the timing of heaven, and choosing the right environment on earth, and cultivating harmony within ourselves. Right? So this is actually really great reflection on and how they see things. And yeah, I think now when I really understanding deeply, I feel much more resonance with this. Like everything has a timing, and how you utilizing the time, and then it can actually help you to live in a more balanced and fulfilling life, right? And yeah, and then I'm gonna talking about earth elements in Chinese metaphysics. And so yeah, so if you're looking at the picture in here, you will see this like the yin and yang, the 八卦 picture. Yeah. And yeah, so and you see this too. So all of this are the other element, the air, or not the air, sorry, the wood and the metal and the fire and the what's else? Not earth. Uh, there's another one. The other four elements except for Earth, right? And Earth is in the center of it, which is totally different in the Western astrology. So Western is like more like all have like opposing element towards each other, and then the Earth is the transitioning. So yeah, so this is the one thing I want to say here is the Earth as a grounding force in Chinese metaphysics. So one of the most beautiful insight of Wu Xing is the role of Earth, and Earth is the center that holds the entire cycle together, reminds us that growth without grounding will eventually lose its way. Rather than striving for constant expansion, Earth emphasizes harmonization, integration, and embodiment. And that's a very beautiful thing when you're looking at the whole system, how it's being built. It honors the integration and embodiment harmonization, because I think there's a very much Western culture, capitalist and produce like encourages to always on the go, always having productivity without actually allow things to embody and integrate, even in the healing space as well. So normally when I say if you really want to heal and if you really want to live a better or balanced life, and you need to allow yourself to rest, allow yourself integrating what you have done, not constantly chasing, the spiritual experiences or chasing another healing or another thing, right? This is all embedded in the same system, like asking for constant production and in a way it's actually depleted your in your system, and also you're always causing a lot of damage in your nervous system, right? So to me, this is one of the missing piece in much of modern Western spirituality. And earth is the element that digest, process, and give form to experiences. And it transforms knowledge into wisdom and spiritual insight and to lived reality. And take the Western astrological chart as an example. The birth chart is calculated from Earth's perspective, yet Earth itself is absent from the system. Symbolically, it is as if we are constant looking outwards to the planet and the cosmos, and without equally looking inwards towards the ground beneath our feet. So like that's the thing I was also talking about. Like when you're looking at the Western astrology, it's basically even the Earth, like you counting all the planet in the solar system, but not Earth. And because you're standing in Earth's point of view, but actually Earth itself is actually having a great influence on us. But also, this is not all the astrology, though. I do know in the esoteric astrology, they consider Earth as part of the chart, part of the system, therefore has a great influence towards us, and also the evolution of humanity. So I think that's quite interesting to see. But Earth is very, 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 very important element in any Chinese metaphysics, right? So much of modern spirituality encourages us to transcend and to pursue higher state of consciousness and extraordinary spiritual experiences. Wu Xing offers a different perspective. It reminds us that true ascension happens here through your relationship with nature, with ancestors, and our communities, our bodies, and the rhythm of everyday life. And in the Wu Xing worldview, enlightenment is not an escape from Earth, it is a deeper embodiment of it. That's the first part. And then when you're looking at this picture as well, you will see the Earth is in the center. It's basically a balancing force for the four elements. So in Western astrology, aspects such as squares and oppositions and are often associated with conflict, challenges, and obstacles. And while this aspect can lead into growth, and the emphasis is often on navigating tension, right? So, like I said, in Wu Xing and Earth is like the middle ground, is like to like a like a diplomatic person role in the middle, and to reduce conflict and allowing the opposing force and to coexist in the same space, right? So in Chinese astrology, Bazi, for example, but in the Western astrology, sorry, I just lost it. In the Western astrology, and it's like more, you take for example, the square, take it as a negative take, okay, because they're like their intention, they're in conflict, right? They're trying to describing it. But in the Bazi astrology or in Wu Xing system, it's actually trying to, yeah, I can see there's like a tension, or they don't communicate well with each other. But how can I finding another element into it and to balancing or even controlling or restraining in order to make this two can be coexisted, right? Yeah. And so there's no good or bad in any relationship in Bazi or in Wuxing, if you want to say. In Chinese astrology, Bazi, for example, the relationship between five elements are not viewed as inherently positive or negative. Instead of asking whether something is good or bad, the focus is on understanding where imbalance exists and what is needed to restore harmony, right? So this is where the Earth element play a unique role. So Earth is a balancing force that bridges opposing energies. As the center of the Wuxing system, it mediates, translates, and integrates the other four elements. It does not erase conflict, Rather, it creates the conditions for seemingly opposing forces to coexist and support one another. Right? This reflects a fundamental difference in worldview. The goal is not to eliminate tension, but to cultivate dynamic balance. Conflict is not a problem, imbalance is. When the elements are brought back into right relationship and what once appeared as opposition become parts of a greater harmony. Yeah, so I think that's kind of like really important role, like how the earth playing out in the whole the Wu Xing system. And also, I think that's reflecting on really strong philosophy that Chinese ancestors and they believed in. So in this way, Earth representing more than an element is a philosophy of integration, reminding us that balance is not found by choosing one side over another, but by finding the center that allows both to exist in harmony, right? Finding the middleman, basically. Yeah, and then another really beautiful part of the earth element and that is missing in the Western, I feel, is in the Wuxing system, earth is more than an element. It is a space between ending and beginnings, right? And unlike the other four elements, which correspond to distinct seasons, earth represents a transition between them. So, like I said before, you will see there's a season like between summer and autumn when you have greater yang, the peak, the joy, and then you need to slowly grounding it down and then allow the yin to get you to allow you to restore your energy. So there's a transition in between seasons. So it is the pause that allow one cycle to settle before the next begins. Without this period of integration, change becomes unstable and growth loses its foundation. Right, so much of modern Western culture encourages constant productivity, perpetual growth, and moving from one achievement to the next. Yet the Earth phase reminds us to honor the in, the receptive, the nourishing, the integrating force within all of us. It is the space where experience is digested, healing occurs, and transformation becomes embodied. Without this transitional phase, we may continue moving forward, but we rarely give ourselves the time to restore, integrate, and truly become who we are growing into. The philosophy is woven deeply into Chinese understanding of time. Right. So, like I said, the whole Wu Xing system is a cycle. It's describing a cycle you're in. So we're constantly repeating the cycle, but the healing, the growth happening when you choose responding the same cycle differently, and then you spiraling up, and then you grow up, right? So when the five elements are further expressed through the 10 heavenly stems, and each season concludes with earth stems, marking a period of transition, harmonization, and preparation before the next cycle begins. Change is never abrupt. Nature always provides a moment to settle before moving on. So this very much encouraging the seasonal living, aligning ourselves with nature's rhythm, is therefore fundamental to Chinese culture and metaphysics. It reminds us life is not meant to be lived at the same space all year round. Yeah. So and also there's a beautiful illustration here. Yeah, and then if you have any thought and reflection, you can leave in the comment below and let me know. And yeah, and then I want to introduce you briefly about how Wu Xing applied in Bazi Astrology, which is the four pillar of destiny. And this is how it looks like in the Bazi Astrology, right? Yeah, so what is Bazi astrology, basically? So to understand Bazi, you must first understand the concept of duality. And just as modern computers run on a binary code of zeros and ones to create complex software, the ancient sages viewed universe as a constant interplay of two opposing forces, yin and yang. And from simplicity to complexity, while these concepts seem elementary, they are the building blocks of existence. When yin and yang interact, they give rises to the five elements or phases of qi. And your Bazi chart is essentially a snapshot of this interaction at the moment of your birth. By analyzing the balance or imbalance of these elements, we can move from abstract philosophy to concrete predictions about human behavior, personality, and destiny. So common misconception I want to emphasize here is Chinese astrology doesn't equal Chinese animal zodiac sign. So that's a big, massive scam that people taking on. No matter sitting east and west, I think most people just trying to analyzing their personality. There's some system doing that, but Bazi is actually not that kind of system. Yes, it can be, but that's not is the major function of it, right? So the 12 animal zodiac sign are part of Bazi astrology, whose function is never about describing personality, but the building block to describe the energetic pattern of time, right? So it is also called the Four Pillars of Destiny. It is Chinese astrology that depicts the energetic pattern of time to describe cycle of life. Its function is to help you master your timing, therefore master your destiny, right? So why Bazi astrology is all about time? So Bazi astrology is built on two foundational components, the 10 heavenly stems and 12 earthly branches. So as you can see here, this is like typical Bazi chart. And so this is the heavenly stem, so which is your year and the birth and month and day and hour. And the timing is actually translated to the true solar time, which is the ancient Chinese calendar time rather than the Western time. So therefore, we do need to know like where you're born, therefore to translate that time to the calendar the ancient Chinese sage was using, right? So yeah, so there's 10 heavenly stems and then 12 earth branches. That's the component. Without this two, and you cannot read your balance chart, right? So together, they're representing different astronomical observations of time cycles within our solar system. When combined, they're creating the 60 pillars, reflecting the cyclical nature of time that repeat every 60 days and 60 months and 60 years. I will talking about this more later on. So your birth chart is a blueprint of energetic patterns present at the moment you were born. By understanding how each year, month, and day, and even hours interact with your natal chart, you can make more aligned decisions and navigating life's timing and cultivating greater balance, harmony, and fulfillment. Both the heavenly stems and earthly branches are derived from the five element or five phases. Each carries a distinct energetic quality and expresses the five elements in different ways, revealing the dynamic patterns that shape both nature and human experiences. Right. And as you can see, I also have this like a little information here. So basically the whole chart is not using the planet itself. It's not using the planet body, but using the cycle. So for example, the 12 earthly branches is actually coming from the Jupiter cycle. And so it's kind of like because Jupiter like come back to the same sign like around 12 years, and that's how the 12 earthly branches coming from, and also that's where the any Chinese animal zodiac sign coming from as well. It's not actually to describing the personality is more about describing, okay, for example, we're in the fire horse year, right? And then there's different element, like for example, what element is in this fire horse, right? There's different element to this year. So it's kind of like describing the whole year's energetic signature as a big theme rather than to describing a person. And for example, people who are born in the fire horse year, they have different like, the day heavenly stems and earthly branches, and the combination of it will totally telling you different stories. Yeah, so I think that's kind of like one association here. And then the solar and another cycle is being used in the system is a solar lunar cycle, which is the heavenly stem. So the 10 heavenly stem were originally used to track the 10-day week. So a Xing, that called in Chinese, in ancient solar calendar. So this likely originated from the 10 sun means, but aligns scientifically with the method of counting days to track the solar year. So that's one thing, 10, where the 10 heavenly stems coming from. And also there's a 60-year cycle as well. So that was heavily used in I Ching as well. The 60 pillars result from the least common multiple of the 10 stems and 12 branches. And it takes approximately 60 years for Jupiter and Saturn cycle to align closely, and for the Sun, Moon, and Earth return to a similar relative configuration. The 60 Pilos map is the grind reset of planetary positions. So this is very interesting. So that's what I'm saying, like all those charts is about describing time, the energetic time signature of that moment. And then each time when we repeat, and then there's like interaction between the element, between like each pillar and how it works, right? So yeah, so I think that's one thing I want to talk about. And also in the Bazi chart, relationship is everything. Like I mentioned before, there's a two relationship cycle between the five element. And as you can see, this is a picture of, for example, the yin yang element of different, for example, the 10 heavenly stem, 甲乙丙丁戊己庚辛壬癸, right? So this is the thing, the 10 heavenly stem and the 12 earthly branches as well. And you can see each of them have a yin element. And also, for example, if you're looking at Chou, this example, and therefore when you're looking at this one, you have to think of in earth, right? So that's descriptive about the energy itself. So what the in energy, receptive, earth energy is like more transitioning and grounding. And so that can describing the time of that time, like what is the energy feels like about, it's like that's a description about the time of that moment, right? And then you can see this association with different like 12 earthly branches and their animal name for the branches. And that's also kind of adding on another layer of describing how the energy feels like. Yeah. So for example, the monkey energy, like what monkey looks like, what's monkey's trait, like really jumpy and really like quick. And, so that is describing this kind of energy in Shen time as well. Right. So yeah, so this is basically this is the chart. But the major thing is it's not about like in that time. It's actually, for example, when you're looking at the Bazi chart, it's to see what is the relationship between your day master, which is a day, what is like, for example, I was born in Xing Chou, I think. I can't remember. Xing, which is this, Xing, which is the in sorry, I think I've got it wrong way around. So Xing is supposed to be yin and Gen supposed to be yang. So it's the yin metal, right? And then I have another Chou, which is this one. So this in earth, right? So that's this. And then so when I'm looking at how it's interacting, it's like the relationship between Xing Chou, this pillar, with the other pillars, for example, the ears pillars, and how this relationship between each other and they interact. If I have really, for example, good relationship, and therefore means maybe something's more smooth. If I have bad relationship, which means there's like maybe more challenges aspect to it, right? I will talk about that later. But this basically is all about understanding the relationship between the day master with your like other pillars, and there's like a lot of layers into it, right? Yeah, I have said before the creative like generative cycle and all that. And the reflection about this is like in many Western cultures, freedom is often regarded as the highest ideal, while limitation and restriction are seen as obstacles and to overcome. But perhaps limitation is not always the opposite of freedom. Perhaps it is the grounding force that keeps us connected to reality, reminding us of our humanity and allowing us to move through life with greater wisdom rather than simply greater speed, right? So yeah, so this I will show you about what I mean relationship is everything. So the whole system, so this like the 10 heavenly stems. And so to understand about the chart, you have to understand how different like the 10 heavenly stem interact and what's the relationship. They have good relationship, bad relationship, and how they're interacting each other and what they when they come together, what they create and all that. So this is all the relationship chart, and you need to understand between the heavenly stem and also earthly branches, and they interact with each other. When you understanding those relationships and how they interact, and then you will understand, oh, like how this movement can creating much more harmony and balance rather than like leading to conflict or friction. Yeah. And also another thing I was talking about, time is linear. That's kind of like description in the Bazi astrology already, when the 10 heavenly stems and combined with 12 earthly branches, and then he describing a energetic pattern like 60 years, 60 months, and 60 days, and that's the cycle it looks like. And then it repeats, and that's matching the shamanic tradition. Like we're talking about time is linear, and the healing is like you feel like maybe things repeating the same year in the same cycle, but you are a different person, you're responding differently, and that's where the evolution and growth is happening, right? So this is just like a confirmation for me. Time is linear and how they describing it in the repetitive cycle we're living in, right? And yeah, and this is the Bazi chart if you're looking at it. So I'm not going too deep what is really looks how it analyzing it, but I'm just want to introducing and just an invitation for curiosity and how this can help your life in a way. So to understand Bazi chart is to understand your relationship with life. To master your chart is to cultivate balance with the elemental relationship you're born into. So this is my chart. And so the most important things you want to looking at when you were born and the season you're in and also what time you're born in. So and that will describing like a day master we call. So the day master is basically day pillar is it talking about you, your core identity and self and also like indicating your spouses as well. And then the ear pillar, which is talking about your ancestry, talking about your early childhood life and also your social context. The month pillar, which is this one, is talking about your parent upbringing and career. I think most of the thing is like this is your career in a way. And then the hourly pillar is talking about your children, your grandchildren and stuff like that, and later life and inner self. So there's a lot layer of different things. And so basically how you see, for example, all of this 10 God, and this is like a system in the chart as well, how this being determined is based on, for example, this Kuei, which is my day master in water. What is the relationship with this one? And then with this like earthly branches, and what is the relationship with two? And then you're deciding to, for example, and like what the 10 God is being used or something like that. Right. So yeah, so this is really complicated system, but it makes sense. It's totally understanding your relationship with each. For example, your relationship with your ancestral, with your social conditioning, and your relationship with your parents, and with your like career, and how your peers helps you and stuff like that. And then the relationship with, for example, your later life when you're getting older, and your children, your health, and all that. So it depends on how this, for example, I have in this chart, I have so many like water. So I have day master water, right? So and also you can see here I have like metal as well, in metal, young metal, and in metal. And then this, I think this is metal as well, and this is another metal. So I have so many metal in this chart. And metal and water is really important. But because when you're looking at chart, when you have too much metal and water, is cold and is intense and is like rigid. It's kind of like frozen water all over the chart, right? Therefore, to balancing this chart, I need more fire into this. There's some principles to using the useful guard and stuff like that, but I'm not talking deep. Like that's what I'm saying. So the whole chart is trying to help you to find a way to warm your chart or find a way to balancing your chart. Therefore, you don't always like living in a stage of there's no expression, there's no outward, and you cannot moving forward. So basically, if you're looking at my charts, like I like studying, I'm good at studying, learning all the system. I can learning really quickly, and also there's like intuitive side of things. For example, I'm doing shamanic healing, and all those intuitive, in-depth healing thing I'm able to do. But because I'm lacking of fire in my chart, therefore I need expression, I need visibility, I need putting things out there rather than because I have the perfectionism in myself. I want to make things perfect before I putting it out there. Therefore, this is a perfect example for how we're utilizing Bazi astrology. It can help you to mapping out your timing, and then when you know which phases you are in, and then you're working it consciously, right? So, and we have a saying called 改运不改命, which is you cannot change your fate, but you can change your luck. And that's where the Bazi coming into play, saying, how can I change my luck by working correspondently with the energy here? And also people will say, hey, like what's the difference between Western astrology and Bazi then? And but Westerners also have the timing wise. But for my understanding at the moment, I do feel like Bazi astrology is more or accurate with the timing wise. Yes, like Western astrology have so many timing technique, but you need to go to very in-depth way and deep way. But this Bazi astrology is quite straightforward and is straight into the core essence of what it is with the timing, because the whole system is building on timing, right? And on relationship with everything. And the goal of the Bazi astrology is really help you to balance your life. It's not to help you get more, is to balance and make living a life that fulfills you and that suits you, that utilizing your own strength rather than trying to be something you're not, right? So yeah, I think that's kind of like introduction about Chinese metaphysics and the Bazi astrology. I hope you're interested in this, and I will be offering this later on. And I just really want to see how this will give you some insight and reflection on it. And thank you. And if you want more information, you can go to my website. There's more, yeah, content that we'll create. And also we have a astrology podcast called Let's Blame the Planet, and that's where we discuss astrology in real time, right? And also I will be putting on more like the Bazi astrology into it and to see how that will inspire people to like be more interested in different system and how the connection is and how it can help in your life, right? Thank you very much.